Hi, this is Marlene, astrologer extraordinaire. So I'd like to ask you a question if you're currently a parent of younger children. And when I say younger children, I mean maybe between the ages of 4 to young teenage years. Next question, is your partner, and even if you're not married, is your partner, husband or wife, a narcissist? So I'm bringing this up because I'm going to begin to share some stories over the next few weeks or maybe months that may make you rethink your personal situation, especially if it's unhealthy. Are you saying to yourself, we need to stay into this relationship, even though it's severely dysfunctional for the children? I really don't want a long intro here, so let me give you the backdrop. I'm 12 years old. My sister's 10. My mother decides to divorce. It was a pretty awful marriage, fighting constantly. Fast forward, I'm 13. My mother has been dating since pretty quickly after my parents divorced, which tells me she probably was very ready for that divorce, more than he was. He didn't want the divorce, but my mother made him miserable. So eventually they filed for divorce. One of these men that my mother begins dating, we only met him very briefly. She gets home from a date. She has a necklace around her neck. And back then, it was called going steady. I said, look, I'm going steady with Jim. She said, I want to ask you both a question. So that question was, I want to ask you girls if Jim can move in with us. Immediately, we both said no. Now, we didn't know very much about him, but kids have pretty keen intuition, and it's interesting that we both said no immediately. A week later, Jim was moved in with us. One of the things that we noticed immediately was that Jim wore tighty-whities. Jim pranced around the house in front of us girls. Now, I was 13, my sister was 11. Let me ask you a question. How appropriate do you think that is for him to be prancing around in front of an 11 and a 13-year-old? I'm going to add 2 points to that. One of them is my own biological father didn't even do that. It was a rarity if he happened to be just running from the bedroom into the shower and you got caught seeing him in his boxer shorts for a split second. The second thing I want to say is this person was 10 years younger than my mother. When I would be 15, he was 25 and she was 35. So what sort of things do you think might happen as two young teenage girls begin to mature? We're not going to talk about that just yet. Now, Jim would prance around in front of us with his tighty-whities on. Both my sister and I would do the eye roll. We were kind of in disbelief and disgust that he would do that. Furthermore, that my mother would allow it. That is what we were surprised about. But that continued to go on, and it would continue to go on from the ages of, for me, 13 to 18. So all 5 of those years were filled with hell because he was a violent monster. So I'm going to share a story with you today. So it turns out that Jim is a pretty big alcoholic. Now, I'm actually the product of 2 alcoholic parents. So I already at this age, I've been around alcoholism my entire life. What we would begin to know is that he would come home drunk a lot, and when he was smashed, it would turn into violence. So pretty shortly after that, the violence would begin. This particular incident, I recall, I was 14. So I got home from school and I had a few girlfriends over. We were playing some board games, and typically Jim would get home right around the 5 o'clock time. So we're in my room and we're starting to pick up some pieces from the board game and put things back together. When all of a sudden we hear this, yee-haw, woohoo, all, thinking, what the heck? Now, On top of that, I hear the siren of a police car. I'm thinking, oh, great. What now? We lived in this apartment complex. It was 2-story. We lived on the bottom floor. So we lived right next to a gas station. And at the end of that pavement or tarmac, there was this big dirt field with, I mean, giant potholes in it. Like you couldn't park your car or truck out there because the potholes were too deep and you'd be in trouble. So Jim used to park. He had some truck out there. He stocked drywall. He had one truck that had 15 gears in it. And very often he would park the forklift out there. Now that forklift only had 2 gears. So it couldn't really go faster than like 25 miles an hour. By now, most of the people in our apartment complex got to know the antics of Jim, or calling the police, or hearing the fights, hearing the screaming, all of this. So now I'm kind of peeking out the curtain and I'm observing what's going on. Well, all of a sudden, I mean, I could hear that forklift. I mean, he had it revved up like, trying to make it go faster than it was really able to go, just to get it into the parking lot. Meanwhile, the cops behind him, the sirens on, the red lights are on him, and he comes bouncing that forklift into that big old dirt lot with the big potholes. Bow, bow, bow. I mean, that forklift is bouncing all around like crazy. And he's still on with this hooting and hollering. And so one of my friends stays. The other one ran out because the other one already knows, okay, well, there's some shit about to go down. So me and my friend are kind of peeking out the curtain. The cop gets out and he says, well, looks like you might have had one too many. I yelled out from behind the curtain. I tried to make it sound like a men's voice or a boy's voice. And I said, more like 20 too many. I'll never forget saying that, and I did. Now, I was raised by parents that you respect your elders, not just your elders, but all elders. And I was a really good student. I was very quiet, very shy, very reserved. So that was not like me to be out of line with statements like that. However, Jim knew it. He knew that I had his number. He knew that I was his worst target. He knew that I watched him like a hawk. I was the one that would call the police. I was the one that would not hesitate to run out that door and go get help. He knew that about me. So now the cops are kind of busy with Jim. So at this point, I can see he can't see me because now he's tied up with the police. At that moment, I decide to stick my head out the window. I look up and then I look to the side of me because I could see all of these heads popping out of the apartment building watching this. I still have that image in my mind. It's a few cops and they decide, okay, we're taking you in. Back then, there weren't blow tests or anything like that. And back then, it was called a 502. They handcuffed him and threw him in the back seat. So I can hear all of that, him screaming and yelling with the doors closed, even with the windows up. Somehow, he spun around in that car and kicked out the back window. Now, so they call backup. So now a few more squad cars come. They take him out of there. Fast forward a couple days, because Jim would spend a couple days in jail, and this would just be one of many times, and I'm going to share more stories on these incidents. So if you have a narcissistic husband or wife and you have violence and you're tolerating this, I hope that these videos are going to make you think twice about the safety of your children, because I cannot tell you how many nights my sister and I sat up thinking, what should we do? Back then, there weren't child services. Back then, there wasn't much you could do about it. Many nights we talked about, well, where would we go? Let's run away. Where are we going to run away to? We had those conversations a lot. So Jim gets out of jail, Now, what I will say about him is he was a very quiet man for the most part. When he was sober, he was a nice person. He was respectable, but he couldn't have a few drinks. He did have Indian in his mix. And it's said, I don't know how accurate this is, but it's said that a lot of people that have Indian blood, and when I say Indian, I mean more like Cherokee, not from India, some of those people can't handle their liquor. Like I said, I don't know, but I'm just putting that 2 cents in there. So a few days later, when he gets home, initially, he wasn't drunk. We would fast forward a few more days, but he remembered something. This night, he comes home drunk and he says, "Hey, I heard you yell out the window. I heard you. You said, 'More like 20 too many.'" And I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Yes, you did." And I said, "No, I didn't. That wasn't me." And then he started looking around. He saw my cat, and he says, we had 2 cats at the time. He said, "Where's one of the cats? I'm going to take one of the cats and throw that cat against the wall." And I saw my cat right there immediately, so I grabbed her and I said, "No, you're not." He moved out of the room, but let's talk about that. Now, I always told the truth. Now, do you think in a situation that's involving my life that I'm going to tell him, yes, that was me? Hell no. Today, I'd probably say, yeah, it was me. You were out of line. So what I'm not happy about is I feel like, right now, I feel kind of nervous, on high alert. I almost had to bring myself back to that time period in my young teenage years to recall this whole incident for you, because that stuff is way behind me. I mean, if you're a parent and you have a narcissistic partner and or violent partner and you have young children at home, I want you to think twice about what I'm sharing with you right here, because I'm going to share more stories in the future, and some of them are going to get worse than this. So thank you for listening. And if you have any comments, I would really appreciate it if you would share in the comments. Thank you so much.